There was a boy named Santiago who tended a flock of sheep across the rolling plains of Andalusia in the south of Spain. He had once studied for the priesthood, but he wanted to see the world more than he wanted to know about God, so he became a shepherd instead. His sheep taught him the rhythm of the land, the language of silence, and the comfort of always moving on. One night he slept in an abandoned church, beneath the broken roof where a great sycamore tree had grown up through the ruined sacristy, and there he dreamed the same dream he had dreamed once before. A child appeared among his sheep and took him by the hands and carried him to the pyramids of Egypt and told him that if he came to that place he would find a hidden treasure. Each time, just as the location was about to be revealed, he woke. He told himself it was only a dream. But dreams, he was beginning to suspect, were the language in which the world spoke to those willing to listen. In the town, a gypsy woman listened to his dream and asked, in return for her reading, a tenth of any treasure he might find. Her interpretation was simple and absurd: go to the pyramids. Santiago left annoyed, certain he had wasted his time. Then an old man sat beside him in the plaza, a stranger who somehow knew the boy's whole life, who claimed to be Melchizedek, the King of Salem. He spoke of a thing he called a personal legend, the one true purpose each person is born to pursue, known clearly in childhood and slowly buried beneath fear and the weight of ordinary life. When a person truly wants to live out that purpose, the old king said, the whole universe bends quietly to help them. He asked for a tenth of Santiago's flock, and in exchange he gave the boy 2 stones, a black one and a white one, called Yorim and Tumim, stones for reading omens when the boy's own judgment failed him. Follow the omens, the king said, and then he was gone. Santiago sold his sheep, the whole life he had built, and crossed the narrow sea to Africa, to the noise and dust of Tangier. Nothing here looked like home. The language was a wall. The faces were closed. He sat in a small bar, unable to speak a word, and when a friendly young man offered to guide him to the pyramids and help him buy a camel, Santiago felt the relief of being understood at last. In the crowded chaos of the marketplace, he handed the stranger his money to make the purchase. He looked away for a moment at a beautiful sword. When he looked back, the young man was gone, and so was everything he owned. The boy sat down in the empty square and wept. He was alone in a foreign country, robbed of his sheep, his money, and his certainty. He could be a victim of a thief, he realized, or he could be an adventurer in pursuit of a treasure. The dream had not changed, only his courage was being tested. With nothing left, Santiago climbed a hill to a small shop where an old merchant sold crystal glasses, the dust thick on every shelf because so few customers ever came. The boy offered to clean the crystal in exchange for food, and the work prospered them both. He suggested a display case in the street. He proposed selling tea and crystal to thirsty travelers who climbed the hill. Month by month, the shop grew rich. The merchant was a kind man and a faithful one, and his own personal legend was a pilgrimage to Mecca, but he would never go. The dream was more precious to him, unfulfilled, he confessed. If he reached Mecca, he would have nothing left to live for. He guided his life by a single word repeated like a prayer. Maktub, it is written. Santiago saw, in the merchant's gentle resignation, a warning. He earned enough to return to Spain and buy twice the sheep he had lost. He stood at the crossroads of going home or going on. Santiago chose the desert. He joined a great caravan setting out across the Sahara toward Egypt. Hundreds of people and animals bound together by a single rule: obey the desert, and the desert will let you pass. The camel driver beside him had lost his farm to a flood and learned, in losing everything, not to fear the future or mourn the past, to live wholly in the single day he was given. The desert stretched endless and indifferent, beautiful and lethal, and as the dunes rolled by, Santiago began to feel the thing the old king had spoken of. A current beneath the surface of the world, a silent language older than Arabic or Spanish, spoken in omens and coincidence and the behavior of the wind. There were rumors of tribal war ahead. The caravan pressed on through the heat and the cold and the vastness, and the boy listened, to the silence, to the camels, to the quickening of his own heart. Among the travelers rode an Englishman, surrounded by heavy books, who had crossed the world in search of a famous alchemist said to live at the oasis of Al-Fayoum, a man 200 years old who could turn any metal into gold. The Englishman lent Santiago his books and spoke feverishly of the masterwork, the philosopher's stone, a sliver of which could transmute lead into gold, and the elixir of life which could cure all illness and defeat death. Real alchemy, he explained, was not chemistry but devotion, decades spent watching metal purify in the fire until the alchemist's own soul was purified alongside it. All things he said were written in a single substance, the soul of the world, and a person who understood their own small part of it would understand everything. The Englishman searched for the truth in his books. Santiago searched for it in the desert and the faces of people. Each thought the other was looking in the wrong place. The caravan reached Al-Fayoum, a green island of date, palms and wells and 50,000 people in the middle of the dead sand, a place of neutrality and refuge where war was forbidden. Santiago met a girl named Fatima, a woman of the desert with dark eyes that seemed to hold the same silence as the dunes, and in the space of a moment he understood the thing the alchemist called the language of the world, love, which needs no words and asks no permission. He told her he loved her. She listened, with the calm of someone who had always known the desert takes and the desert gives. She was a woman of the desert, she said, and women of the desert know how to wait. If he was part of her personal legend, he would return, but he had not yet finished his own. Love does not keep a person from their purpose, Santiago learned. True love supports it and waits. One evening, watching two hawks wheel against the sky, Santiago saw a sudden vision in their flight. An army descending on the oasis, swords drawn, where no army was permitted to come. He did not understand it, but the old king had told him to trust the omens, and so the frightened boy went before the tribal chieftains, men of war and great age, and warned them that the neutral oasis was about to be attacked. It was a dangerous thing to say. If he was wrong, the punishment was death. The chieftains listened in silence, then broke their own ancient law and told every man to arm himself. At dawn, 500 warriors swept out of the desert toward Al-Fayoum and found it ready. The oasis was saved. Santiago was rewarded with gold and named a counselor of the oasis. He had read the soul of the world and been believed, and that night a rider in black, armed and masked, came to find the boy who could see the future. The rider was the alchemist himself, the 200-year-old man the Englishman had crossed a continent to find, and it was the unschooled shepherd, not the scholar, whom he chose to teach. The alchemist saw that Santiago had learned to listen to the world without needing to translate it into theories. "Come with me to the pyramids," he said, "and finish what you began." Santiago hesitated. He had found gold, he had found Fatima, he could simply stay. But a treasure refused, the alchemist warned, curdles into regret, and a personal legend abandoned haunts every easy day that follows. So the boy left the oasis. As they rode, the alchemist taught him that fear of suffering is worse than suffering itself, that the closer one comes to a dream, the more the personal legend becomes the true reason for living, that a heart, though it may be afraid and may complain, must be listened to, because it came from the soul of the world, and to it, one day, it will return. Beyond the oasis, the desert was at war, and Santiago and the alchemist were captured by a tribe who took them for spies. To buy their lives, the alchemist made a reckless promise that the boy was a powerful magician who could turn himself into the wind and would do so in 3 days to prove it. Santiago was horrified. He did not know how to become the wind. He barely knew how to listen to his own heart. Alone on the dunes with death 3 days away, he began to speak. First to the desert, asking for help, and the desert answered that it could offer only its sand. He spoke to the wind, and the wind answered that it could not do this thing alone. He was learning the oldest secret of the alchemists, that no part of creation can do anything by itself, but every part is connected through the one soul of the world, and a person who truly speaks to it can ask creation to rearrange itself. On the 3rd day, before the watching tribesmen, Santiago reached past the wind and the sun toward the hand that had written everything, the source the alchemist called the soul of the world, and which the boy understood, finally, as love itself, the force that had made the desert and the hawks and Fatima and his own restless heart. He stopped trying to perform a miracle and simply joined himself to that current. The wind rose. It rose into a sijmoom, a storm so violent the men had to look away, and when it cleared, the boy was no longer where he had stood, but seated on the far side of the camp, untouched. The tribesmen let the travelers go, awed and afraid. Santiago had not learned a trick. He had learned that he was not separate from the world he had been crossing, that the same silent language ran through the sand and the storm and the marrow of his own bones, and that to speak it, he had only to stop being afraid. At a Coptic monastery near the end of the journey, the alchemist quietly proved his art, heating lead in a pan until it ran golden, and divided the gold 4 ways, for the monks, for himself, for the boy, and a share kept in reserve in case the boy should need it. Then he sent Santiago on alone. At last the shepherd crested a dune and saw them, the pyramids of Egypt, golden in the sun, exactly as the child in his dream had shown him. He wept, and where his tears struck the sand a scarab beetle appeared, an omen, and there he began to dig. He dug through the night for the treasure of his dream. Then refugees from the tribal war fell upon him, beat him, and searched him for gold. As they left, their leader sneered at the foolish boy digging in the desert because of a dream, for he too had once dreamed, twice, of a treasure buried in a ruined church in Spain, beneath the sycamore tree where shepherds slept. But he was not fool enough to cross the world for a dream. Santiago laughed, alone and bleeding beneath the pyramids, because he finally understood. The world had spent its whole strength leading him across 2 countries and a desert and a war, only to tell him where the treasure had been all along, under the sycamore in the abandoned church where his journey began, the very place he had slept and dreamed on the first night of this story. The treasure had been home, but he could never have known its worth, or his own, without the journey to find it. He went back across the sea to Andalusia, to the ruined church with the broken roof and the great tree growing through the stone, and beneath its roots he dug, and there he found a chest of old Spanish gold coins, jewels, and golden masks. The treasure was real, and as the wind shifted and carried the scent of her perfume across the miles, he smiled and spoke to it. "I'm coming, Fatima," he said. The treasure had brought him home, and love was waiting where the wind could find him.